Let's take a look at some information and charts on Grin for Brave New Coin. Is it alive? Is it dead? What's going on? Does it still exist? Can you still buy it anywhere? These are all the questions I will answer and more in this hopefully slightly longer than 10-minute video. So Grin kind of arrived with a flourish in a mysterious way in 2019. It's a privacy by default chain. A lot of Bitcoiners supported the idea of it and are backing it by the looks of it. No amounts, no addresses, very similar to Monero to a certain degree. They use a specific tech called Mimblewimble. I'm not going to try to explain that, but there is plenty of great documentation on how that works, should you be interested. A few other things. They have a linear distribution. I'll show that, talk about inflation. And they had no pre-mine, no dev anything. Their treasury is independently funded of block reward, very similar collectively to how BTC was launched. And they go on to talk about scalability, fungibility, blockchain size, as far as being able to handle eventually increasing load of transactions. And they go through the list of things that they are not like other altcoins. They're definitely later to the game in a altcoin launch cycle. They were not an ICO. They were not an ERC20 token. They were none of that stuff. So they do have two mining algorithms, Cockatoo 29 and Cockatoo 32. I'll get to that in a second. They also have, like I said, their treasury here has Grin and BTC. They've had a lot of BTC. You know, notionally, this is a lot for a coin, a chain. So they are very well funded. That's always kind of the first thing you got to look for on these coins that aren't super popular or well known. Do they have developers? Are they funded? Is it proof of work? And if it is, what does that decentralization look like? And they just released, this was January, so not just, but a few months ago, they released stuff, right? So again, they're not like disappearing. There's people doing things and stuff in the GitHub. Always something worth checking. You know, I like looking at the LTC GitHub just for the lulz. The Doge GitHub just for the lulz. They say they do stuff off of GitHub. Sure. But if I'm seeing stuff here, I don't care if it's changing a period on something and deleting a period. It'll show up here like a tracked change on any living document, but this just tells me, yeah, people are doing stuff, right? I don't care what it is. Somebody's doing something, you know, at the very least, bare minimum. So here's the Cockatoo 32, which is ASIC minded, and the other 29 is the GPU minded. And there was a miner just released in January. So either this miner is a scam, not legit, or the company said, hey, we got some demand here for miners, or there's a reason they made these, right? They're not like, you wouldn't make the miners if you didn't think you could sell them, right? You wouldn't make the shovels if you didn't think you could sell the shovels in a gold rush. So they thought they could get money for it, apparently. There is a minor profitability here per day at 4 cents per kilowatt hour, even with 39% inflation annually, which is massive. For any chain, I give Zeke a lot of crap about their inflation. Grin has more. So that's something to consider. I did a quadruple take when I looked at this. This is the block distribution for Grin, and it looks like based on this website, which may not be accurate, not quite sure, but according to this website, last 1,000 blocks have been mined 73% by a single pool, which would definitely represent a potential centralization and or 51% attack vulnerability, reorg potential, censorship potential. And if nobody's talking about this, then you know people don't really care, which is never a good sign. When Bitcoin got close to 51% on whatever pool it was, I can't remember. There was a big stink about it. People cared a lot and said, hey, you got to move your stuff elsewhere. So either this is the best pool with the best incentives, or it's like the only one people use. I'm not really sure. I mean, there are others listed here, but it looks like this Goblin pool gets most of everything. And very similar to Monero and Zcash in the privacy side of things, it's going to be hard for Grin to get listed on legitimate exchanges that have regulatory oversight, because they are privacy by default. Zcash has an incredibly hard time unlocking those privacy abilities on exchanges with regulatory oversight because they aren't privacy by default. So they're just a chain. You know, they aren't doing what they have the potential to do on the exchange side of things. And Monero is virtually listed nowhere, and neither is Grin by the looks of it. KuCoin is kind of the only semi-reputable exchange that I see here. Most of these others are either like South Korean or just not legitimate. I wouldn't trust a dime on any of them. Not that I would trust anything on KuCoin, but it is at least usable, and that's what I'll be using the price chart data from in a second. So it's proof of work. We got to check how many nodes are there. Are the nodes distributed according to grinnode.live/stats? There are 77-ish nodes, if I'm understanding this correctly, distributed fairly well. You know, this isn't like concentrated in China or super hyper concentrated in South America, whatever, you know, right? Nothing in Greenland or Iceland. But just a simple pass like this is as good as I need to solve my question about decentralization. So this looks more decentralized, certainly, than the blocks distribution, which is troublesome. Here's inflation rates. Currently 39% for Grin, Zcash at 11, Dash at 5, Doge at 4, BTC at 1.9, Monero at 1.3. ETH, if it shows up, is somewhere around 4, probably a little less than that after EIP 1559. LTC also around 4 as well down there. So it's just a hard ask for anybody who's not deeply involved with the community and understands what's going on with Grin to buy and hold something with 39% inflation where there is no staking, right? That's just, again, my initial lizard smooth brain pass is much like Zcash. It's hard to convince anybody to hold that over long term when it has the inflation rate it has, right? Maybe that would have worked in 2011, but 10 years later now, where BTC's emission is down to less than 2%, Monero's down to 1.3, where it's going to stay there kind of in perpetuity. There's no supply cap on Grin either, which is what it is. It's fine. You probably need a perpetual block subsidy for something like Grin that doesn't have robust hash rate, but that's still just too high. It sits as an outlier for people. So not only is the inflation high, but you can't really buy it anywhere. And here's what that looks like over time. 1 Grin per second forever. Simple, but right now, that's just as a percentage that's too high, in my opinion. Transaction counts, basically 0. They've been rising slowly since June, but you know, all of this is probably just mining rewards related, because if we map this to difficulty and hash rate, it all falls together. Fees are less than a penny, just about a penny. Not many people using the chain, so that makes sense. As more people use a chain like ETH, fees go higher, and if their scalability is poor, fees explode quickly. So definitely not bullish to see transactions fall off like that. And here's difficulty, which also has fallen kind of flatlined here. I don't know the exact switch over between Cockatoo 29 and 32, how that works in the back end as far as being more GPU friendly in the beginning and then more ASIC friendly towards the end. That may affect this difficulty curve. Price obviously a big deal as well. If price is flat or falling, hash rate's going to fall, difficulty is going to fall. If price is rising, hash rate and difficulty are going to be increasing, mainly based off of profitability. So let's move on to technicals. Fundamentals are thin and troublesome for a proof of work network, but arguably you could say it's still early days for Grin. The TA, you know, it's even though it's been around since 2019, it hasn't really had massive appeal other than this January to March run. For the most part, it's just been below the 200-day moving average, even below the 50 for most of its life. And this may get a crisscross here. Probably worth setting an alert if you trade on KuCoin. I don't know. But what I would do for these coins if I was trading them, the ones that are thinly traded at least, I'd set an alert at like the psychological levels of 50 cents, $1, $1.50, and just like never look at them again. You can also set alerts for the 50 and the 200 cross here on the daily and just ignore it until it crosses. I don't think it's worth putting this on a watch list. Just having alerts for it probably makes more sense. But it's definitely at historic lows relative to even listing. Cloud-wise, it's never been above the cloud for an extended period of time. It's mainly been below the cloud. Potential edge to edge here. I wouldn't count on that. This is, again, it's a thinly traded altcoin on a garbage exchange. So keep that in mind. It could double here just like everything else kind of is right now. This did arguably have an inverted head and shoulders throughout all of 2020 and the beginning of 2021 that allowed this thing to finally move up a little bit. Now this could arguably have some sort of like multi-year W at $1.50, and then by like 2024 maybe it's goes to $3, right? I don't know. It's just worth putting on the back burner, knowing that it exists, what it is, what it does, and being informed when it moves and you know what it is, right? Here's Grin BTC, never been above the 200-day moving average for an extended period of time throughout its entire life, never had a bullish 5200 cross. These are the things I like to see if I'm looking to get into something, because the moment this flips bullish, that says, oh, okay, things have changed, right? Maybe it doesn't double or triple, but it's probably going to move up if this thing starts to print a bullish 5200 cross. Even here at the lows, it's less than 1,000, almost less than 1,000 sats. Even rotating some Dogecoin profits into this is probably worthwhile. It's just so cheap relative to everything right now that if this gets any headway anywhere, again, it's going to be tough because it's not going to be listed anywhere because it's a default privacy coin. But if this is on some DEX in some way, it might already be so. I'm not quite sure. But yeah, if that ever happens, then I can see this thing at least having a little bit of life. But right now, this isn't, this is doldrums type stuff, no volume. The worst thing for this is if it gets delisted off the few exchanges it's listed on, then it's basically dead from a price perspective until it gets relisted again. And on the daily cloud for the Grin BTC pair, never been above the cloud its entire life, basically. So again, if it gets above the cloud with a 5200 cross, then you can say, okay, this is going to do something. Other than that, I'd set alerts for it and just ignore it price-wise until it moves it through those very basic bullish trend metrics. Lastly, I'll just mention the ETH-BTC fund and DeFi portfolio. I trade for Techemy Capital on Enzyme.finance, non-custodial portfolio management tool where you can send ETH or USDC or just watch what I'm doing. You can see AUM, performance, allocation. You can see all of the DeFi coins I'm in here, all of the yield plays I'm making. You can see trades in the bottom tab here, when I make the trades, for how much and where, all on the UI here. So that's all I have for this one. Like, dislike, comment, share, subscribe, and happy trading.